My name is Emily Carter, and if you saw me today, sitting in this high-rise office in downtown Chicago, silk blouse pressed sharp, heels clicking softly against polished marble, you'd think I had it all together. And maybe I do. From this corner window, I can see the river bending through the city like a silver ribbon. People rushing below, taxis honking, life moving fast. I sip my coffee, the faint vanilla creamer still warm against my lips, and let myself breathe in the quiet power of the moment. But then my phone buzzes. The name flashing on the screen makes my heart skip. Daniel Brooks. My cousin. The man who once smiled at me across a lawyer's desk while quietly cutting me out of my own inheritance. I don't answer right away. Instead, I trace my finger along the edge of my fountain pen, the one I bought after my first $1 million account closed. Funny how objects hold power. Back then, my hands used to shake when I signed papers. Now, the pen feels like an extension of me, steady, certain. The phone buzzes again. A voicemail drops in. I know exactly what it's about. His business is crumbling, and the irony is sharp enough to taste. Because what Daniel doesn't realize yet is that every dollar he's desperate to save, every account he's clinging to, flows through my hands now. And for the first time in years, I let myself smile. I wasn't always this woman in control. Back then, I was just Emily, 22, fresh out of college, still believing family meant protection. I remember the day like it's tattooed on my skin. My grandmother's will had just been read in a stuffy law office on Michigan Avenue. The blinds rattled from the wind outside, but inside, everything felt suffocating. My heart pounded as the lawyer shuffled his papers, his voice dry, rehearsed. And then came the words that hollowed me out. The Brooks family estate, assets, and properties will be consolidated under Daniel Brooks, with provisions made for him to manage the funds on behalf of the family. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Daniel? My cousin? The same one who once borrowed my notes in high school because he was too lazy to study? I glanced at him, searching for reassurance, but he just sat there, jaw sharp, tie knotted perfectly, lips curling in a smirk that made my stomach twist. He didn't look at me, not really. It was as if I didn't even exist in that room. I felt my hands tremble in my lap, nails digging crescents into my palms. But Grandma wanted me to have a share, I whispered, my throat tight. The lawyer avoided my eyes. Daniel didn't. He leaned back in his chair, his voice low, smug. You're too young, Emily. Too inexperienced. I'll take care of it. You don't need the burden. That word, burden, burned through me like acid. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about power. The rest of the meeting blurred, but I remember clutching the silver locket my grandmother had given me just weeks before she passed. Inside was a picture of her holding me as a baby. On the back, she'd engraved one sentence. Patience, my girl. The world bends to those who endure. That night, I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. My pillow was damp, my chest aching with betrayal. But even through the sobs, her words echoed. Patience. Endurance. I realized no one was coming to save me. Not my parents, not the lawyer, and definitely not Daniel. If I wanted a future, I had to carve it myself. So the next morning, I walked out of that house with just 2 suitcases, my grandmother's locket, and a quiet vow in my heart. One day, I'll build something no one can take from me. Starting over wasn't glamorous. I left the Brooks mansion and moved into a tiny studio on the south side of Chicago. The walls were thin, the radiator clanked at night, and sometimes the only meal I could afford was instant noodles with half a boiled egg. But that little apartment was mine. No cousin. No family drama. Just me. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing in the mornings, tutoring high school kids in the afternoons, and answering phones at a downtown law office in the evenings. My feet ached, my voice cracked from exhaustion, but every paycheck felt like a small rebellion against the life they thought I'd never survive. Then came the turning point. One night at the law office, the senior partner, Margaret Ellis, noticed me. She was in her late 50s, sharp bob haircut, pearls always at her neck. She caught me studying one of the firm's finance binders during my break. Instead of scolding me, she raised an eyebrow. You understand any of that? I swallowed, embarrassed, but nodded. A little. I studied economics in college. That moment changed everything. Margaret became my mentor. She saw past my cheap blazer and trembling voice. She saw someone hungry to learn. She let me sit in on meetings, explained financial models over late-night coffee, and once even handed me a stack of client reports with a simple challenge. Fix the numbers. Let's see if you're as sharp as you look. I worked through the night, red pen bleeding across the pages, and when I handed it back, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Good. You've got potential, Emily. Don't waste it. Those words became fuel. The next few years were brutal. I studied for certifications while surviving on black coffee and secondhand textbooks. I walked into boardrooms where men twice my age dismissed me before I even spoke. I heard whispers, she's too young, too green, too emotional. But each doubt only hardened me. My first small win came when I helped a struggling startup renegotiate their loans. The CEO shook my hand, tears in his eyes, saying I'd saved not just his business, but his employees' families. The check I earned from that deal was enough to pay off my student loans. From there, things snowballed. I built quiet connections, handled small accounts, then bigger ones. My reputation grew. Not loud or flashy, but steady. Reliable. I never posted about my success online, never flaunted my new apartment, never gave my family a reason to suspect how far I'd come. At night, I'd sit at my desk, running my fingers over my grandmother's locket, whispering, I'm getting closer. And slowly, piece by piece, I built an empire in the shadows. An empire they would one day see. And when they did, they wouldn't just see a girl they once dismissed. They would see the woman who now held their future in the palm of her hand. The call from Daniel's office came on a gray Thursday morning. Miss Carter, this is regarding Mr. Brooks' accounts. He's requesting a meeting. For a second, I almost laughed. The boy who once told me I was too inexperienced was now desperate enough to call me, without realizing who was on the other end of his sinking ship. I agreed. Not out of spite. Though, truthfully, the thought of seeing his face when the truth unraveled was delicious, but because I was ready. It was time. The next day, Daniel arrived at my office with 2 family members in tow, Aunt Linda, with her pinched lips and judgmental eyes, and Uncle Robert, who always stood in Daniel's shadow. They walked in expecting a cubicle, maybe a modest office with peeling paint. What they found instead was a corner suite on the 40th floor of a glass skyscraper. The room itself was a portrait of everything I had built. Polished marble floors. Walls lined with modern art pieces, each one purchased after a major milestone. A sleek walnut desk held nothing but my laptop, a fountain pen, and a framed photo of my grandmother, her smile soft but strong. Daniel's eyes darted around, trying to make sense of it. His mouth opened, then closed again. Aunt Linda clutched her purse tighter, as if afraid the air itself might steal from her. Uncle Robert cleared his throat, but said nothing. I didn't rush. I let them soak it all in. The view of the Chicago skyline stretching wide, the quiet hum of success that filled the room. The silence pressed against them until Daniel finally snapped. What is this, Emily? How do you afford all this? I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing one leg over the other. My heels tapped softly against the floor, steady, confident. Afford, I repeated, letting the word linger in the air. Daniel, this isn't just mine. This is me. My firm. My clients. My accounts. His face paled. I slid a folder across the desk. The embossed letters read, Brooks Holdings, Client Account Manager, Emily Carter. He froze. Aunt Linda gasped. Uncle Robert leaned in, squinting at the paper like it might change if he stared long enough. No, Daniel whispered. That's impossible. You can't be in charge of my accounts. I tilted my head, my smile polite but razor sharp. Funny, isn't it? You once told me I was too young, too inexperienced, a burden. And yet here we are. Every transaction, every loan, every desperate attempt you've made to salvage your business, comes through my hands now. The silence cracked like glass. Daniel's bravado wavered. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice shook. So what? You're going to ruin me? Is that what this is about, revenge? I shook my head slowly. No, Daniel. This isn't revenge. This is reality. You took what was mine, and I built something greater. I don't need to ruin you. You're already doing that yourself. His shoulders slumped, the weight of his failing empire pressing down. Aunt Linda finally spoke, her voice sharp with disbelief. Emily, surely you can't mean to. I cut her off, my tone even. I mean exactly this. The accounts stay under my control. If Daniel wants help, if any of you do, it will be on my terms, not yours. For the first time in years, I watched them fall silent, not because they dismissed me, but because they finally understood. The girl they once ignored was gone. In her place stood the woman who now held the keys to their survival. And the look on their faces? It was everything I'd waited for. Daniel sat stiff in the chair across from me, his tie loosened, his confidence unraveling thread by thread. The man who once smirked at me in that lawyer's office now looked like a boy lost in a storm. I folded my hands on the desk, calm, deliberate. Let's be clear, Daniel. You came here because you need me, not the other way around. He flinched, but didn't argue. I opened the folder again and tapped the highlighted numbers. Your company is bleeding cash. 3 loans overdue. 2 vendors threatening lawsuits. Payroll barely met last quarter. If I withdraw my firm's management, you won't last 3 months. His jaw clenched. So what? You're just going to watch me fail? I shook my head. No, I don't want you to fail. I want you to change. Aunt Linda scoffed, her pearls rattling as she shifted. Change? He's your cousin. Family is family. You can't just... I turned to her, my voice sharp but steady. Family didn't protect me when Daniel stole my inheritance. Family didn't stop him from calling me a burden. Don't preach loyalty now, when the only time you acknowledge me is when you need saving. Her face flushed, but she stayed quiet. I leaned forward, meeting Daniel's eyes. Here are my terms. You want me to manage your accounts? Fine. But you follow my conditions. I raised one finger. First, full transparency. No hidden deals, no shady loans. Every dollar passes through me. A second finger. Second, you cut out the toxic spending. No luxury cars, no gambling trips, no more pretending you're untouchable while your employees worry about their paychecks. A third, you step back. Hire competent people. Listen to them. You are not the genius you think you are. Admit it and let others help. Daniel's nostrils flared, but he stayed silent. And finally, I held up a fourth finger. You give back. For every profit you make under my guidance, a percentage goes into a community fund. Scholarships, small business grants, something that actually builds instead of destroys. The room went still. Daniel blinked, his pride battling his desperation. You're asking me to give up everything that makes me dangerous, I interrupted softly. Yes. That's exactly what I'm asking. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, to my surprise, Uncle Robert leaned forward. His voice was low, thoughtful. She's right, Daniel. You've run this family into the ground chasing your ego. Maybe it's time you let someone else take the wheel. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. His hands trembled as he rubbed his forehead, the weight of defeat pressing down. Finally, he muttered, Fine. I'll agree. But only because I don't have a choice. I smiled faintly. You do have a choice. You can choose pride and lose everything. Or you can choose humility and build something real. The decision is yours. For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of realization in his eyes. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. And the balance of power had shifted forever. The weeks that followed were different. For once, the calls from Daniel weren't filled with arrogance or empty bragging. Instead, they were short, clipped, almost humble. He sent me reports on time. He listened when I pointed out flaws. And though his tone sometimes carried a hint of resentment, I could sense it. He was learning. Aunt Linda, too, began to soften. She sent me an email, just one line, awkward and unfamiliar. Perhaps I misjudged you. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was more than I'd ever expected. Uncle Robert stopped being a silent shadow. In our meetings, he asked thoughtful questions, as though finally realizing his voice had value. And me? I found myself breathing easier. The bitterness I'd carried for so long began to loosen its grip. I had spent years building walls, shielding myself from the pain of betrayal. But now, watching them slowly change, I realized something. True power wasn't in revenge. It was in choosing what to do once you had it. One late evening, after the city lights flickered on outside my window, I pulled open the drawer of my desk. Inside was my grandmother's silver locket. I held it in my palm, the cool metal pressing against my skin. The engraving on the back caught the glow of my lamp. Patience, my girl. The world bends to those who endure. She was right. Patience had carried me through nights of hunger, years of doubt, and a lifetime of being underestimated. Endurance had shaped me into the woman who now sat at the head of the table, unshakable, undeniable. I fastened the locket around my neck, the weight of it both grounding and freeing. Then I stood by the window, watching the skyline that had once towered over me, but now felt like part of my story. Daniel took my inheritance, but I built something bigger, stronger.
Mine.
And now I control not just his accounts but my destiny.